There we go. So I want to start quickly by just talking about culture. I think we can agree that this is a bit of a buzzword these days, and rightly so in a sense. Like, I'm glad that we're talking about it because it's important. But I do believe that we all have a different definition of the word, and that can create confusion at times. So for today's purposes, so for the rest of the talk today, I want to define culture as traditions, habits, and behaviors that are based on a group's values. So think for a second about your own work environment. Families, religion, religious organizations, youth clubs, they all have traditions, habits, behaviors that are based on a shared set of values. So let's think about that for a minute as we move on. So our values and the way that we behave, they're a reflection of our experiences. And those values and those experiences inform our beliefs. So often, organizations try to manage or control the actions of employees in order to drive results. And we know that we have to start much deeper than that. As agilists, we're in the mix, right? We know how deep this can go. So you can get short-term results by driving action, but a resilient organization is one that begins with creating shared experiences and collective beliefs that support the mission. So I love this quote from Alan Watts. The only way to change human behavior is to woo instead of preach, to love instead of threatening disaster, to point out how glorious something could be and in some way to live it. And again, I go back to short-term results versus long-term results. This is how you build an organization that can actually be agile. Because the fact is, gone are the days that we can shame or scare employees into cooperating in the long term. Instead, we create an environment where experiences are the building block, where employees are compelled and able to share those experiences with others. Some of my earliest memories consisted of sitting at the foot of my grandmother's recliner while she told me stories about our family. The funny thing about my family is that my dad was a little bit of a surprise baby. So he was a lot younger than his siblings, and therefore I was a lot younger than my cousins. So, there were a lot of stories that I didn't experience firsthand. And so she would tell me these stories. And storytelling as a channel for culture goes back to ancient times. Long before we were able to write, the elders of a tribe would tell their stories to the younger members. Then they would become the elders and do the same in time. Humans are hardwired for connection, and we find that connection in sharing our experiences. It's also as if our brains are just waiting for it. So we actually possess what's called mirror neurons. These are neurons in our brain that allow us to hear a story, process it, and feel it almost as if we were there. You may or may not have experienced that with the story I told at the beginning. Because of these mirror neurons, we behave as if we were there too. So this can be especially powerful in an organization because we can leverage the experience of one or several to actually bring joy to the whole. If we're not careful, it can go the other way. If we're not intentional about our stories, then we have gossip. We have stories that aren't true that still make their way through mirror neurons. And so people are going to tell stories one way or another. And what we can do is be intentional about drawing out the stories that mean something. And then through that storytelling, we can create new traditions, new habits, and new behaviors.